So what we're talking about today is systems analysis and design. And the reason for that is the work you're going to do is embedded in an organization, a client's systems analysis and design process. If they need a new system, then they have to select it. They have to analyze what sort of system they want, analyze whether they can afford it, analyze whether it fits the strategic direction of the company, the tactical direction and that the department wants for that particular piece of software. And then they have to design it. Now, the beautiful thing about Salesforce, of course, is that a lot of the design is already pre-built, 80, 90%, and then you do the configuration of it. But nonetheless, the company and you have to think about design as well. So we're going to talk about systems analysis and design, SA&D. And a lot of what we're going to talk about is one of the key roles that you'll play, which is systems requirements. And so we're going to look at the big picture first, so you understand where and what you're doing fits into the big picture. Because I always feel that if you understand the big picture, then the details make way more sense and you can do a much better job on the details. So let me start off with a very traditional view of systems analysis and design. And this picture here catches it nicely. It's actually also called the Waterfall method, and I'll show you why in a second. But systems analysis and design is frequently at a high level expressed as the SDLC, the Systems Development Lifecycle. And the Systems Development Lifecycle has 4 phases to it. The first phase is planning. The second phase is analysis. The third stage is design. And the fourth stage is implementation. So planning, analysis, design, and implementation. Now, typically, you will come in after the planning phase. There's going to be people who actually do the planning phase frequently at the client that you're at, sometimes in conjunction with Cognizant and ATG people. They'll help plan what's going on. But where you come in is at the analysis phase and at the design phase and obviously at the implementation phase. The analysis phase for the work that we do, that's going to be called systems requirements. We're going to get into, we'll have probably discussed already a little bit about systems requirements, and we're certainly going to do a lot more on systems requirements. I've already said that the design phase, so remember it's planning, analysis, design, and implementation, PADI, PADI, which is also the Professional Association of Diving Instructors. So planning, analysis, design, and implementation. So you're likely not going to do the planning piece. You are going to do the analysis piece. That's the user requirements. You are involved with the design phase. A large part of that is packaged inside the Salesforce platform, and you're definitely a part of the implementation phase. So that's the systems development lifecycle. Typically, it's called the waterfall approach, and this is why. And so what this shows is the 4 phases: planning, analysis, design, and implementation, shown as a waterfall. And the reason for and that's just the way it's been called. And it's because when systems were first being built back in the 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, and 90s, actually, this is how things were done. First, you did a project planning exercise. And then from that plan, kind of the very big picture, you analyzed exactly what sort of system you needed. And you finished the plan, then you did the analysis. You did the analysis, and when that was completely done, then you went on to the design. So from the analysis, you picked what you were going to do, and you did some design, and then you did all the design piece, and then once the design was completely finished, you went on to implementation. So that's why it's called a waterfall, because obviously water doesn't flow uphill, it only flows downhill. And so you did planning, completely finished it, then analysis, completely finished it, design, completely did all that work, and then you did the implementation and did all that work. That went on from the 1950s all the way through the 1990s. Frankly, a lot of companies still did it in the 2000s as well. That's the traditional waterfall approach to systems design, analysis, design, and implementation. And I'm telling you this because a lot of the places you're going to be working, the people who you work with are going to be very familiar with the waterfall methodology. It's how the old system that's probably been replaced was designed. And I need you to understand that history and context matter. And so you might be like, why the heck was this done this way? Or you might be talking to people who talk about this system methodology, systems design methodology. So I just need you to understand that this is how the world worked until about mid-2000s, 2000 if you were in a kind of on the edge, leading edge company, systems analysis and design company. And then around, I say 2000, 2005, we had something called the Agile Methodology coming out. And this picture here shows what the Agile Methodology is about. And this looks a lot more complex, right? There seems to be it actually is a lot more complex. The very basic version of the Agile methodology is that you are continuously doing all the different phases that are in the systems development lifecycle, the Waterfall methodology, rather than completing, planning, analysis, design, and implementation, rather than completing each one and then completely locking it down and going on to the next phase and completely locking that down and going on to the next phase. That's the Waterfall methodology. Instead, the Agile methodology, really all it is you do a little bit of each all the time. And so you do a little bit of planning and analysis, design and implementation. You do a piece of that, and then you show that to the user and they're like, oh, that's great, that's exactly what we want. Then you do another little bit of planning, analysis, design and implementation, and you show the client that and they love it or hate it, and then you can go back and fix it. And that is what the Agile methodology really solved a problem of. Was the old Waterfall methodology. You'd do this planning, this massive planning exercise, and the user never got to see anything that you were designing at all, planning and analyzing and designing. And so they only got to see the client, the user rather, only got to see the actual finished product right at the end. And frequently, as you'll find out, doing user requirements and systems requirements, when you're talking to a client about what they want, frequently they don't know. Frequently they don't know what the new options are, so they kind of get caught up in the history and context of their lives and how they've done work. And so when you're asking a user what they want, they might say, this is what we want, without really knowing what the possibilities are. And in that old methodology of planning, analysis, design, and implementation, a lot of the work, actually all of the work was done up here before they got to implementation. And so frequently users were very unhappy with the product at the end. And so this Agile methodology, where you do a little bit of all four, show the client, love it or hate it, fix, love it, move on, fix, hate it, repeat. It allowed for user interaction all the way through the process. So let's take another look at this, what's called the Unified Process Lifecycle Model, which is a long way of saying Agile. Let's take another look at it. And as you take a look, you should notice that vertically there's inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. So it's just life cycle, as in phases of the project, are now called inception, elaboration, construction, and transition. Those are largely the same as planning, analysis, design, and implementation. And then in the Agile methodology, at least the unified process that I'm working with and showing you here, there are different disciplines. And if you look on the left-hand side, and I'll just recut back to the slide so you can take a look on the left-hand side. What you'll see is there's business modeling, requirements, design, implementation, testing, deployment, configuration, and then there's right at the bottom, there's project management and the environment. All that is largely the pieces of the actual pieces that we've discussed already in the systems development lifecycle. So remember, the systems development lifecycle had planning, design, implementation, PAD, planning, analysis, design, and implementation. Those are still the phases of this Agile process. You still have to do planning, design, analysis, and implementation. What I kind of like about what I like a lot about the Agile methodology is it does talk about the business more, which is critical. I mean, the whole point of the Agile methodology was to make it more business focused, more user focused. And so another piece that I really like about this model, let's take a look at what's going on inside, and now take a look at the kind of the shapes of the curves that go through our Agile methodology here. And what you see is the height of the curve is kind of how much activity is going on in that phase. And you'll see, as I mentioned, that kind of each phase we're working on all the different phases: planning, analysis, design and implementation, testing, project management. We're doing them all the time. And that's what I said is we're kind of doing the planning, analysis, design and implementation. We're doing it repetitively, we're doing it all a little piece, talking to the user. Do it all, just a little piece of the project, talk to the user. We do it all, little piece, talk to the user, all the time. But as you can imagine, there are times when we need to do more implementation, more design, more requirements. And so this chart, and I'll just show it one more time, take a look at how, the requirements is kind of front loaded, the implementation is spread over the last 2/3, testing is spread over pretty much, maybe 80% of this. And that makes sense. You have to get requirements before you can build anything. And then you have to get requirements before design. But in an iterative process, you get a little bit of requirements, then you do design, then you do some implementation and testing, and then rinse and repeat. You get some requirements, you design it, you implement it, and you test it with the user. So as more complex as this seems, really all it is the systems development lifecycle, planning, analysis, design, and implementation, just done in tiny little chunks, and you interact with the user as you're going along.